This is your home for St. Cloud State hockey, keeping you up to date on the NCHC.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Pervix!
Women's WCHA.
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies alongside
The National Hockey League.
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it! He scores! Kirill, the thrill is for real! Welcome to the NHL, a game winner!
And everything from the state of hockey.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.
Welcome to the Huskies Warming House Podcast Den. And welcome in, folks, to episode number 101. Nick, I'm happy to bring you in here. Nick Maxon is who I'm talking to. I myself, Noah Grant. Can you tell it's an early Sunday morning? I was about to say I'm really happy we hit over 100 episodes, but it makes them a lot harder to say quickly during a show intro. But nonetheless, we've got a lot of fun things to talk about here in today's show. Men's hockey, of course, figured out how to put the puck in the net. That's exciting. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Women's hockey, unfortunately, not a goal to be had on the weekend. Their season is done. We'll kind of recap a little bit about what that means for their program and their season moving forward, so to speak. A little bit of Minnesota Wild talk. They've been slumping as of late. And then our extra ice session, we're going to do some way too early NCAA tournament predictions and see how we think the next couple of weeks are going to shake out. Without further ado, as always, we'll start with Center Ice View News and Notes and the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup. Center Ice View News and Notes. Center Ice View provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to centericeview.com.
Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, Noah, and in the voice of Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber, so you're saying there's a chance? And actually, yes, there is a chance. St. Cloud State did what they had to do, took care of business against Colorado College. Side comment, really like their coach, honestly. Chris Mayotte, had a chance to talk to him pregame. Great dude. Got a chance to also talk to him media day back in October. Good first impression, but even a little bit more in-depth conversation prior to Friday's game. Let me tell you, he's an impressive young man. I will tell you this. Give him a couple of years, just like Rico up at St. Thomas, and I think there'll be some good strides down there from the Tigers, because that used to be a pretty prominent program in college hockey, and it'd be nice to see them turn things around. So, side note, despite Colorado College falling to, I think they're in actually really, really good hands there with Chris Mayotte. Speaking of St. Cloud State's, though, taking care of things on Friday and Saturday night, Sam Hench is returning to form at the right time, thank goodness. Easton Bradzinski also figuring out that the net's on the ice, and that you can put a puck into the net. Yeah. So it's good to see him score for the first time in, I think, 10 or 11 games. So that was huge. 4-1 victory on Friday night. Saturday, a 6-2 win as well. Hench has got a goal in that game as well. 5 power play goals on the weekend. Now sitting at 38.5% on the weekend, 33% for the season. Shots very much controlled by the Huskies, but I think the bigger point here, Noah, is that they're much better scoring areas is where these shots were coming from. So I know St. Cloud State wanted to get back to the greasy areas of the ice. I certainly felt like they did that. So, they outshot their opponents by 17 or so, but at the end of the day, I feel like it was more of just the quality of scoring chances, I think, was the bigger storyline. So where does that leave us? That leaves us with a 17-11-4 overall record, 9-9-4 in conference play, which is exactly tied with UMD. They're also 9-9-4. So how about that going to the NCHC, right? This next weekend, Noah, going to be quite fun, honestly. So 5 of its last 8 games, either by a tie or by a win since last being swept by North Dakota and Denver at the beginning of February, not January. It's been a long 60 days. We'll put it that way.
Technically the end of February, end of January.
End of January, yeah. So North Dakota.
We know what we're trying to say.
Yeah. Beginning of February into January, because that was 28th, 29th, or 27th, 28th with North Dakota. Either way, it was not that stretch was tough when Sam Henches and Nick Perbix were on their Olympic duties along with head coach Brett Larson. But what this does, as we talked about, this sets up quite the weekend with Duluth. Now, it's been tradition for these two teams to finish out the regular season with each other, swapping home sites. But I believe in the last 4 years, I think this is what's interesting. I don't believe there's been quite the implications on standings or playoff standings in the last 4 years I've covered this team than there has been this weekend, where it's come down to the wire. So this is going to be quite the showdown. Again, Huskies trailing by just a mere 2 points. We covered this on Fox 9 last night. So nonetheless, Huskies have to win regulation on Friday. That is the absolute must. And then what that does is set up a Saturday sort of multi-scenario if you can take care of business on Friday. If they push it to overtime, that would, I think, do it with that single point. But you got to take care of business on Friday. So either way, Huskies give themselves a chance, and now looking more likely, unless Western Michigan really craps the bed against Miami at home, that these two teams are destined to play the next 4 games in a row, 2 in the regular season, as well as 2 to 3 more in the first round of the NCAA playoffs.
Yeah, it'll be a really interesting kind of look there. Obviously, we're going to take a look at those playoff scenarios moving forward here when we talk a little bit more about men's hockey. So we obviously won't give it all away. But the only thing I have to say is how about the Miami Redhawks? Anyway, moving on to some women's hockey. Their season has come to a conclusion. Speaking of games kind of near Miami, but not really, out at Ohio State there, they were outscored by a combined score of 9-0 in the 2 games there, 6-0 and 3-0 to end their season. Fifth-year player Emma Palouzny playing in her last 2 collegiate games of her career, 50 saves on 59 shots to add to that impressive total, Nick. Some pretty impressive numbers. It was exactly her 100th game ever at the collegiate level. 24 wins to her credit. I didn't know that. And 12 ties as well, too. It's actually quite a good little bulk of victories there, 6 shutouts, a 309 goals against average, and a 920 save percentage for a goaltender that has played in front of some teams that have not been very good, so to speak. It's been pretty impressive. A 562 win percentage. I believe it's like 530 or 513 or something like that in conference play. So winning over half of her games that she was in, giving her team a chance. And how did she do that, Nick? Franchise leader, 2,824 saves for Emma Palouzny to close out her career. That's a lot of saves. So wishing her obviously the best of luck. Would not be shocked if she decides to play at the level, but I also know that from talking to her as well too, I mean, the position has taken a toll on her body a little bit. Obviously, she jokingly and affectionately talks about how she creaks and groans essentially every time she gets out of bed in the morning from the movement of the position. So we'll have to see what she's up to. I could totally see her doing either. I could see her playing, or I could see her just going off into the sunset and doing her own thing. So we'll have to keep an eye on her, as well as 5th-year captain Kenzie Wiley, who finished her career in a St. Cloud State sweater. A couple players to keep note on for next year: redshirt senior Kenna Westlow and seniors Yanina Newland, Tatum Geyer, and Carly Reese all have another year of eligibility left, technically, with the COVID rules that are understated. Final point here, Nick. Taylor Lind pacing all scorers this season with 25 points, Emma Gentry with 23, and Yanina and also Olivia Savar with 15 and 14, respectively. So the team finishing with 9 wins in the season and 4 wins in WCHA play, and some decent splits in the non-conference schedule, and doing all right at home. It was really the road games that really kind of took a toll on this hockey team. But that's it. They're done. That's it for the season. For those who are interested in the rest of what the WCHA and women's hockey has to offer, the WCHA Final Four essentially is going to be taking place upcoming here in the next couple of weeks, as well as the NCAA tournament. So you won't want to miss it, and it should be a fun ride for the rest of the teams involved.
Just a quick comment too on Emma Polizny. What an outstanding human being too. We spent some very good time with her. Also with Kenna Westlow too. They've been fantastic. I think despite maybe the on ice performance, which we can have debates on, and to where maybe those struggles are originate. I still feel like that there's still a really good quality group of ladies that are in that locker room, and credit to them for a good run, a good season. I think that there were some games too that I think that they kind of got away from a little bit too. So I think the record a little bit skewed this season. Now I'm not trying to cover up some obvious need for improvement, but I do feel like there was some jumps this year, maybe not to the level we would have liked to have seen, but I still feel like they're trending slowly but surely in the right direction. You kind of hope that there's just a time where you can make a bigger jump, but it will be fun to watch this season. And as you mentioned, some of those ladies that do have that extra year, do they take it, or like you mentioned, do they move on to other things? Speaking of moving on, so Daniel Charna has not moved on from playing NHL hockey because apparently he's just like subhuman. I don't know what do you call it. 44-year-old just recently passed Chris Chelios for most games played by a defenseman. This 1,652 games played. That's nuts. That's a lot of hockey. Remember, this guy used to be an Ottawa Senator, New York Islanders, Boston Bruins the majority of his career, spent some time with the Capitals as well. So I mean, this guy just is a machine. And when you're 6'9", and in the words of Jack Edwards, can be a ballerina sometimes with a spin move at the blue line. I guess you can play a lot of hockey. So congratulations there to Zdeno Chara. That's pretty nuts. So just to give you some context to some other good names that played a little hockey: Scott Stevens, Larry Murphy, and Ray Bourque. He's now 6 all time. So it just doesn't matter if you're forward or defenseman and skaters. He just passed Mark Recchi, a former Bruin himself. The all-time leader, Patrick Marleau, the infamous Patrick Marleau, who even when he was playing at the age of 40, still felt like he could skate like an 18-year-old. That guy was unbelievable to watch throughout his career. Yeah. He 1,779 games played for any skater in the National Hockey League. So he's got some work to do, but again,
it's about a season and change is what it is essentially. Yeah. So
season and change, and I kind of feel like he probably could do it. Now, the question is, does he want to do it? That's the big key. How about some signing news, right? Calgary hiring ex-Ducks coach Bob Murray as a scout. Oof. Let's just talk about Bob Murray for a second. For those who don't know about Bob Murray, recently he was fired no less than 4 months ago from being the general manager of the Anaheim Ducks. Had some substance abuse issues, which, we're not judging by any means. We all have our things that we need to work on, but it is curious that only 4 months out, he gets put into a scouting role. Now, granted, that's not a leadership position, but it does kind of show there's still some of that old boys club that's still around.
It is a traveling position, I think, which is probably the scarier thing. And if you know. I think the other thing, though, I try to look at it as a positive thing. I mean, hopefully he is making strides, and Calgary felt that, he is fit for that role, and that it makes sense for him too. And who knows, what his role as a scout is. I mean, he might be very regional too in that aspect, and maybe just have a good grasp on for example, players in Southern California or something like that. So,
right.
We'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, I think the timing is a little bit early. But anytime we think the timing is early with Anaheim, then the Arizona Coyotes come into the deal and have a hand in all pies in the rest of our news. So, I mean, what do you expect, right?
I wonder what John Tortorella has thoughts on this. Anyway, so how about some other signings, right? Arizona re-signed their D-man Dyson Mayo to another 3-year extension. Coyotes also made a trade, moving netminder Carter Hutton to the Maple Leafs, who hadn't played since October 25th. Let's see. Yeah, Toronto looking for some depth in goaltender as they try to make a push to get out of the first round, which I still think they're going to probably fail. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens there. But part of that trade, Ryan Dzingel was part of that trade, and then he was put on waivers by the Maple Leafs, and then what do you know? San Jose picked him up. So Ryan Dzingel goes from Arizona to Toronto, then just ends up being not that far west in San Jose, California. And how about this? This is interesting, Noah, and I'm surprised that this actually happened. Nathan McKinnon, who appeared to intentionally slash a linesman after a faceoff draw, which would have been an automatic 10-game suspension, was somehow avoided this. And I'm kind of curious because normally the league is very protective of the officials, and they should be, right? Is Nathan McKinnon getting a little bit of a break here? Was there maybe some missteps by the referee that led to this? Or maybe are you just as surprised as I am?
Yeah, they said that his intention was to slash the player, but that was exiting the face-off. Yeah, I watched it back. And regardless of even if your intention was to slash the player, it doesn't really freaking matter. You slash an official. Should have been an automatic 10 gamer, just like the Antoine Vermette situation. I think it's pretty cut and dry on this one. I definitely think there is a favoritism with a star player there, and it kind of pissed me off a little bit. So that's kind of all I have to add on that. What do you think?
I don't know how the league can make the argument he was trying to slash a player because
it's garbage.
The player was well beyond the reach of the stick, in my opinion. And to me,
and also Nathan McKinnon is probably one of the fastest players in the NHL. You're telling me he couldn't take 2 hard strides laterally and chase somebody down if he wanted to slash him? Just a thought.
Right. So I don't know. And the other point is, if I remember watching the video correctly, I think he looked right at the linesman when he did it.
Yeah.
But again, as I mentioned to you, I still think there was some star power there that avoided the suspension rather than the actual rule. But what the hell do I know?
Yeah, it was garbage. Speaking of
garbage, speaking of hot garbage, go ahead.
Yeah, yes. Moving to our final 3 topics, let's start with Sean Avery. His comeback is over before it started. What the hell was this? I don't know if this was a publicity thing or what the deal is, but he skated. Okay, so to give some context, the man has retired last in like 2011-12, essentially, pretty much closer to 2011. Hasn't played in 10 years, has skated about 6 times since that, besides a little pickup league where he plays once a week in Los Angeles. And he thought, well, hey, I'm going to return to the NHL. I've got 7 months to do this. So he signed with the Solar Bears in Orlando in the ECHL, 41 years of age. And they released him 2 days later because guess what? Sean Avery can't play hockey anymore. On Wednesday, he has said that the ECHL was going to be his stepping stone to the NHL. I love this quote because it's so stupid. Here's what it says. I've got 7 months to be physically ready to walk into an NHL training camp. There's a lot of time based on how I feel right now physically and how I feel on the ice. After skating 6 times, after not skating in 10 years, my timing is coming back and getting sharper every single time. I can feel it happening.
I need to comment on this.
What can you feel happening, Sean Avery? The depression in your couch from your ass? Like, come on.
Oh, so a couple of things for those who are not aware, maybe our younger audience. Sean Avery, he was kind of the Tom Wilson before Tom Wilson. I don't know if he was he wasn't really a dirty player, I think but he was kind of a gnat. Actually has his own rule book into with the famous Marty Brodeur incident in front of the net. Yeah. Basically
think about if Brad Marchand had like a younger brother that couldn't play hockey.
Yeah, he was never a skilled player. He was definitely more of an agitator per se, although he never really fought. That's the thing also know is that he was more, getting under the skin of the opponent. So I'm trying to think who else was like Alexander Burrows, maybe a better comparison. Because Alexander Burrows, I mean, he would scruff, but I don't think Burrows would fight as often. Here's what's funny to me. 41 years old. Tell me which NHL team is going to take a risk on a 41-year-old and played in the NHL in 10 years. And well, granted, he's got more NHL games than you and I both combined. But at the end of it, at 41, no, dude. Yes, and your timing is not coming back. I'm sorry. So anyways, you can continue now.
So just dumb. Anyway, speaking of the younger generation, a little bit more of a somber topic here on this one. This one just coming out last week. Toronto prospect and 2020 15th overall draft pick of the Maple Leafs, Rodion Amirov, has been diagnosed with a brain tumor. General Manager Kyle Dubas announced. This one's kind of a sad one here. Amirov is currently at a medical facility in Germany. He's undergoing treatment, and he's a forward, and he's with his family. He's not going to return to play for the KHL this season. His agent Dan Milstein, who's a very common agent that a lot of people should know, said that Amirov is skating 3 times per week and he's working out every day. So that's a good sign. Hopefully he's getting back to that point. Last season, he led Russia with 6 points in 7 contests at the World Juniors. So pretty good little hockey player. He's played in 10 KHL games this year. So you kind of hope that he's able to fight his way through that and be able to continue and hopefully join a Maple Leaf squad as a fantastic addition to that group there. Closing out the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, and injury news. Only a couple of them here. Pittsburgh defenseman Mike Matheson, week to week with an upper body issue. Carolina's Tony DeAngelo will miss a month with a midsection injury. Chicago forward Jujhar Khaira will miss the rest of the season after back surgery. And Toronto's Jake Muzzin was placed on long-term injury reserve, which is often probably going to affect the Toronto Maple Leafs at the deadline. My notes say that's supposed to be it, but Nick Maxon is laughing. So what do you got, Nick? The fact that Carolina's Tony DeAngelo.
No, it's. Did you invent a new? It's not upper, not lower. Now it's midsection.
Literally, what the release says. I thought it was
seriously.
Weird too. I thought it was weird too. I mean, that kind of gives you a
Carolina has had. Carolina has had some media type savviness the last few years, including some trolling in terms of offer sheets per se. But midsection, that's interesting.
How do you define the midsection? Where is the midsection? I mean, like,
I don't even know. I don't even know up and down anymore. And honestly, so, I don't know. I would think torso, maybe. Like, ribs,
are we
maybe?
talking?
Ribs,
talking
probably?
full thoracic? We talking full thoracic cavity? Yeah, pelvic area. Like, what are we talking here? You know what I mean?
No idea.
Yeah. Well, we don't have any idea what we're talking about normally. So, hey, why don't we continue with some more of this? We're going to head over to the regular portion of the show where we've got some Minnesota Wild stuff and some college hockey news. And welcome into episode number 101 here on the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick Maxon joining myself, Noah Grant, as always. Nick, it's been a week. You've been very busy doing some broadcasting things.
Sixth one in a row here this morning. I'm tired.
Yeah, obviously things are not going well on the other side of the world in terms of those sorts of things. Kind of difficult to watch. All in all, what's your assessment of the week, and how are you doing?
Well, besides, the physical exhaustion, right? I think a little bit of reflection here for my time with HP, because I think it's important. Last night may have been that lost broadcast. If the Huskies can't win Friday and take care of business on Saturday in a couple of different fashions, we'll talk about that later. That's it. We would be looking at potentially getting that Friday, Saturday, Sunday series if it is at home. I say potentially because the licensing fee per game in the NCHC is not cheap. I learned it's not cheap.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, there would be a cost involved in that. So even if it were to happen, there's still question marks as to whether we would pick it up. So what I will say this, what a year of growth that I had as a broadcaster, what a year it was for the Huskies, some ups, some downs as of recently, and hopefully finishing on an up note. But it's been a hell of a year. I can't believe that on Tuesday, it's going to be March 1st. And that means that's we're coming up to 60 days here to the end of the semester, which is unbelievable to think about. And yeah, it's been a ride. Lakeville North taking care of business on Thursday against Rochester Century, a 10-2 shellacking by that squad. They controlled it the entire game. Really wasn't close, unfortunately. That's you hate to see those in high school, honestly. You really do, because and I get that the parity in high school sports is much wider. Just but you kind of wish that some of those some of those other schools would, I guess, how am I phrasing this correctly? You kind of wish that the parity was better, because when you go into a section tournament like that, you hate to see something like that, where the game essentially was over in the second period.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. It kind of depends on the league. Same with hockey, right? Depends on the level, depends on the conference in some cases and that sort of thing. But, Nick, speaking of things that are a little bit too close for comfort, unfortunately, obviously, I think a quick comment is at least noted here, the Russia-Ukraine situation. I think that the one thing that we would like to point out here, quite obviously, and I know I speak for you when I say this, is that we are not in favor of of having war and having Russia do what they're doing. I think that needs to be said. And it's difficult. Some of the videos that have come out. I mean, I don't know if you got to see that video of the guy who was driving on the street and pretty much got run over by a tank, essentially. houses getting bombed. There's videos on that too. It's senseless. It doesn't make any sense. I don't care.
No.
I don't care what political affiliation you believe or anything like that. It's senseless violence, and you hope it doesn't escalate to more than what it is. We'll have to obviously see. Obviously right now Russia is very hampered with the Swift bank happenings that just happened yesterday, so we'll have to see if that has any effect. But
That's going to severely debilitate. For those who don't know exactly what the Swift is, essentially it's the international wire transfer lines. When you, again, for those who don't know, I work in banking. For those who want to make an international wire transfer and come to my branch, they have to provide what's called a Swift code. It's a numerical / alphabetical code. So essentially, instead of a routing number, that's the Swift code. That makes sure that it goes to the right spot. And then even some countries like Switzerland is one of them. I know a few others, Morocco, where there's what's called an IBAN number. So you have the Swift and then you have an IBAN, and that IBAN number is sometimes 32 characters long. Pretty nuts. And then I know in Switzerland for sure, even if you receive a wire transfer, now wire transfers are like direct deposits, right? So it's instant funds availability. There's really no limit on how big you can go. So, I mean, if you wanted a wire for 25 million, okay, there's nothing that says you can't do that. In Switzerland, they actually will hold any wire funds for 7 days just because they want to confirm that money is there. Now, it's funny because in the US, when you do a wire transfer, you have to use collected funds. This means you're basically saying, yep, these funds are good and I'm sending them over to you. So this is huge for Russia, because if they're, and I'm kind of curious as to the response that they will have with this. So you talk about escalation, you talk about, obviously the horrendous, human suffering that's happening. And I want to make sure I make this clear. From either side, it's not good, right? Even from the aggressor, there's people that are losing their lives. There's people that are losing their livelihoods. You have people in Russia that are protesting, they're getting arrested. It's not good. So at the end of the day, you hope that there's a resolution sooner than later. You hope that the violence calms down. Not a fun situation, and just it's not good.
It's odd because to be fair, it's the worst European conflict in history since World War II. And it's also it's much obviously deadlier than the Cold War within a week of the inception of whatever this is. All because you have a leader who is making false claims essentially about a Ukrainian president, essentially using Nazism as an example and neo-Nazism as an example when the Ukraine's leader is Jewish. So it doesn't make any particular sense at all. So
doesn't have to.
Yeah. To liken it to a leader in the 1940s, just take a guess as to how close it comes to this, all because one man has an ego in this. But like you mentioned, kind of a dangerous piece too. There's Formula One drivers, potentially, NHLers would suffer from this, where there's passport implications.
Well, KHL, there's been two teams, Riga, Latvia, and then the Jokerit from Finland, again, who's part of that, have both pulled out. And I know, at least from what I've read, Jokerit, just for the playoffs, it sounds like Riga, Latvia wants to just essentially pull out of the KHL altogether. And that's not only for the rest of this season, but it could be just I want to be done with this league. So there could be some very widespread implications on what's happening. I'm happy with these decisions. Let's put it that way. But again, you kind of wonder, as this story continues to evolve, I'm more curious as to the long-term repercussions, especially with the economic sanctions, with the implication of the disbanding from SWIFT, and you kind of wonder, what Russia's response will be. Are they going to come to the table peacefully, or are there going to be more aggressive measures? And I think that's kind of what, at least I'm waiting on. You certainly hope for more peaceful deliberations.
Yeah, it kind of, like you said, kind of senseless. And, the other piece of this too is essentially Russia doesn't want NATO near them, and then they're threatening war against other NATO countries too. And that's kind of what this whole thing stems about. And it's idiotic. But anything else that you wanted to add there, Nick?
Well, if you want to go to the NATO thing, I'll just bring it up real quick. For those who don't understand, the whole Russian chessboard, right? So, Ukraine and especially Belarus have been chessboard pieces for Russia. Russia looks at NATO as essentially an extension of the US, an extension of UK. And basically what, as NATO forces do is that they line up military assets in these countries. And basically, if the way Russia sees it, if Ukraine were to join NATO, now again, I'm not sure I'm 100% correct in this. I'm obviously speculating, but I believe if I'm reading the reports right, we're reading how Russia's really looking at the situation, right, from what they want as Russian interests. If Ukraine joins NATO, that basically puts the U.S. on their doorstep. That takes away Russia's ability to kind of have some leverage in international relations, as well as to move forward. I don't want to say Russia's interest, because it really is Putin's interests at this point, right? Because the protests in the streets really kind of tell you where his own people really stand on this. I think even they're seen through the BS per se that they're spewing. But in other words, they see that, and this is really, and again, you talked about controlling the narrative, right? They're trying to say that this is defensive, that Ukraine was about to invade Russia, so this was a defensive war. Obviously, the entire world knows BS again. But again, this is how they're trying to portray their side of it. And again, we'll just have to see how these things evolve. And it's sad that, again, there's human lives being lost, and it's senseless acts of violence. And you just hope that we can end the violence soon and get back to the table and see if we can't work something out.
Yeah, the kind of goal is to keep the Western allies off the doorstep, so to speak, like you mentioned. Speaking of senseless violence, the Minnesota Wild have not played very good hockey as of late. No. That was probably a poor transition. But what I'm trying to say is that the Minnesota Wild have not had a lot of energy and jump, losing to Calgary in pretty unceremonious fashion the other night. They dropped, I believe, 4 of their last 5. Besides that lone win against the Edmonton Oilers. Kind of very quickly here, Nick, Minnesota, the Wild kind of feel like they've been on the back burner as of late because they haven't really been particularly healthy. Is it time to start freaking out about Minnesota, or are they just kind of going through their first real slump of the season and they're not healthy and they're missing bodies?
Well, when you're missing bodies, I know a certain broadcaster will go depth. See, I told you so, but I'm not going to repeat that. But does kind of have a point when you're playing like this and you're injured. It does actually show the depth isn't maybe. Here's the thing, right? The Jeek line, right? The Erickson at Greenway, and who am I missing? Foligno, right?
Yeah.
The Grief line, yes. It shows that, when you have lines that it's more about the chemistry of the lines than anything, right? And because what chemistry can do, Noah, is you can elevate people's games, right? It can be like that perfect storm. I mean, let's talk about the Sedin twins and how just they two, you could put those two with almost anybody on the ice, and that would be just an insane line, right? It was actually so fun to watch those two when they played, just because they knew each other was. They didn't have to look. They made some unbelievable plays. It was so fun to watch. But to that point, it can take away, or it can mask deficiencies in a individual's game, is what it does, right? And I think what we're seeing here, and I think the alarm bells are more on the defensive side right now, because the Wild are still scoring. Because what was it, 7-4 last night? They lost to Calgary, if I recall correctly. It's the goals going in the net. So, I think it was Matt Dumba back, or was he still out? Or I'm trying to.
He's still on LTIR.
He's still on LTIR. So
yeah.
So does this mean, and I think the bigger implication is with the trade deadline coming up in just now about 3 weeks, if you're Bill Guerin, you're watching this, you've had a good season so far. Is your problem in the defensive core? Do you need depth forwards that can play a little bit better defensively? Do you go out and get another goaltender? So I think that it does raise some questions. As a panic mode, no. You're still having a really good season. Your still win percentage is really good, but you definitely are watching this closely, this latest slide, because they've had, was it 5, that 8-game winning streak, then was it 5 in a row that they lost? So I mean, you're gonna have ups and downs, but I think the way this team is losing lately, I think there is some cause for a little bit of concern, especially in the back end. But again, injuries are playing a part of that too, and you kind of wonder what Bill Guerin will take from it and see if he feels like he needs to make a move.
Yeah, certainly question marks in the face-off dot too. It'll be interesting to see if he feels the need to make a move. Obviously, the cap crunch is a big question mark.
Doesn't help. Nope.
Yeah, coming up into Kevin Fiala's potential re-signing, the way that he's been playing as of late doesn't help. It does, but it doesn't, if that makes sense. So we'll have to kind of see how that shakes out. Minnesota, a very heavy schedule for them, obviously, coming up. They have Calgary again this upcoming Tuesday. if my sheet will load here. Calgary followed by a swing out to Philadelphia and Buffalo before coming back home against Dallas.
That should right the ship for 2 games, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, one would hope anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
But we'll have to see how that shakes out. We're going to head on over to some women's hockey here, Nick, and that was what our trivia question was about this week. So this was before the game yesterday. Unfortunately, the women's team unable to get the job done, but essentially the question was asking, what season is the last in which the women's hockey team has won a game in the WCHA quarterfinals? So the opening round of the WCHA quarterfinals. Nick, any stab on a year?
I will admit I cheated and looked at this, and it was 09-10.
Yeah, 2009-10. Bemidji was the last one. So St. Cloud State has won 7 total games in the WCHA quarterfinals, making it to the semifinals twice in 2005-06 and 07-08, both against Ohio State, the first of which was a clean sweep, and the second one went to 3 games that the Huskies were able to win that one. They have never won a game in the semifinals in the 2 times they've made it. I think they've lost to Minnesota, Duluth, maybe both times. But for sure, I think it's Minnesota and Minnesota Duluth, or just Minnesota Duluth, and it hasn't been close in either of those games. And they've won other games, single games against Duluth, Mankato, and Bemidji, the last of which, like we mentioned, came in 2009-10. So their season is done, Nick, like we had kind of talked about. A couple players getting ready to depart. Emma Paluzny, if you didn't hear it in the opening part of the show, 100 games played, a 309 goals against average, and a 920 save percentage, 562 win percentage, and 2,824 saves. Just highly, highly impressive. Kenzie Wiley, a 5th-year player, a captain, also out the door. And redshirt senior McKenna Westlow, who we spent some time with, fantastic person, as well as seniors Yanina Newland, Tatum Geyer, and goaltender Carly Reese, all on the docket for potentially returning or going their respective ways. But Nick, Huskies didn't score a goal at all this weekend, losing 9-0 to arguably, to be fair, one of the better teams in college hockey on the women's side in Ohio State. They are a powerhouse team. Finishing obviously second in the WCHA this season. They could win a national championship. They are good this year.
They are,
But nonetheless, we've had this discussion. We've had this discussion before. Steve Mcdonald at the end of his contract, question marks lay there, question marks on returning personnel. I mean, what is your overall assessment of this season so far? Like you mentioned, finishing with 9 wins on the season, probably could have got to 13 or even 14. Some of these games that they were really close in. Obviously,
they didn't. Well, and the part of that is a lot of third period leads that evaporated. And I think, again, we talked about this the last couple of weeks now. Is that a question of coaching? Is it a question of personnel? Again, I think we said it, and we both agree with it. I think the trend of talent is going up. I think that we can say for sure, right? But there's talent, and then there's playing the game, right? You can have quick feet, you can have soft hands, you can have all that good jazz. But I think at the end of it, I think what has to be questioned here is, and I've got some inside information from some of the folks that are behind the scenes. I think the question is, within a coaching staff, and we talked about how Mike Gill was a great coach for Minnesota, but how does he handle the person? Does he get people to buy in? Again, I don't know. I still feel like there's a trend upwards. Now, with a recruiting aspect, I don't know if that's heavily Molly and Janelle or if that's Steve. So do you give him a year extension? Do you give him a 2-year extension to see if he can get over the hump?
The leash is going to be short. I think that's the piece to kind of pay attention to. Now, I think the most pivotal part of this whole process, and I don't say this to be funny, the players. I think the players are an integral part of this process. One, obviously, because of how they play, but number 2, they're the best people to ask when it comes to knowing what the temperature of that locker room is. And I was thinking about this the other day because, like I said, we like Steve. He's a great guy, but we also understand that, like anything, the higher up you get in hockey, the more of a business and more you have to execute at particular times. And I was thinking about, as I was looking back to St. Cloud State's record, like you mentioned, haven't won a semifinal game since 2010. A swing of coaches that have been in there. Eric Rude, who of course had a really great career and now is at the Division I level on the men's side. It still goes back to that point. I mean, in some senses, I was looking at some of the teams back from like 2014-15, 2015-16, and some of the kind of the higher end goal scorers or playmakers that they had. And granted, St. Cloud State has players like that. Taylor Lind had a fantastic season this year.
Coming out party for Taylor Lind.
Yeah, Olivia Savar, turned it on late. Enid Newland had a great season and probably could have had more points if it wasn't for international play and the things that she was up to. And Emma Gentry, what an impressive jump she has made as well too. But I want to ask this question honestly here, in kind of a pseudo Steve Mcdonald defense. Nick, is this hockey team, even though they're trending in the right direction, are they just not as potent of an offense as teams in years past? Are they just not a potent hockey team? How much of this is Steve, Molly, and Janelle, and how much of this is just a hockey team that just doesn't have all the pieces, just can't get over the hump? And I hate to say it like that, but I think it's fair, the reality. A couple years ago, like we mentioned, they had 4 total wins on the season, 2 in the WCHA. Like, they were not a good hockey team. I'm sorry.
No. And, when we talked about, the culture of that locker room too, because when you're not finding success and, it wears on you mentally as a competitor. Yeah. Right. So now, and I think, I talked about this with some other folks at the rink just the other, just this past weekend is, to fix the situation, there's an even bigger problem, right? Because you have not that far away established winning programs in Wisconsin, in Minnesota. Mankato's been, kind of, that middle of the pack, but they're still good, UMD. So
Ohio State. So
you're losing the recruiting battle already, just because, again, you've had sustained periods of unfortunately just not being able to have sustained success. So there is something to be said about recruiting better talent in that environment alone. Now, I think there's both at play here, honestly. So you take that into consideration, right? You have the talent that you're going to be working with, right? Who probably need a little bit of coaching in terms of the game itself, that also need some skill development, right? So already you're playing catch up with that. And at the end of it too, I think the best comparison to this in men's hockey would be almost like Bemidji State. And here's why I say that. Bemidji State is in a similar recruiting situation in Minnesota as St. Cloud State women's is. You're not going to get the highest end talent. You just don't have the scholarship money. Again, you've got other more high profile programs that are going to steer some of that high talent away from you. So what do? That team has an identity. Tom Steratori has them play a very unique, very defensive first style of hockey. And guess what? Last year, they made noise in the NCAA tournament. So when coaching comes into this, and that is how can you get players to buy into a system, whether it's that system or any system that they feel like they can breed success, that's getting them to buy in. And that's where coaching comes into play. So though, as you very eloquently mentioned, Noah, and I think this is important, is I think that is the ultimate question. What is the temperature with the players in the locker room, and what their relationship is like with the coach? How do they feel things are going? And that might be, sort of that last string of whether he gets an extension or not. And again, and you hate to throw Molly and Janelle in the situation too, but they're part of the same staff too. We don't know everything about those two. Is there tension there as well? So, because at the end of the day, it's a team effort, right? It's an indictment on the entire coaching staff. So this is going to be an interesting storyline to follow. I'm not sure if Molly and Janelle's contracts are up. That I don't know. I think that's a good question for us to research. But again, a lot of question marks that athletic director Heather Weems will have to sort through. And you just kind of hope that whatever decision is made is obviously made in the best intention of the program and the players. And, if it is indeed a new direction that, it's made, that's the best decision for. But if Steve is hung on to another year or two, I think, Noah, like you said, I think there would be a shorter leash in this. You kind of hope that, things continue to grow. Well, the question is, do they see it, and how much patience do they have with it?
Yeah, one of the things that I think you go back to the recipe. You mentioned Bemidji State. I was actually going to go a little bit closer to home, Nick. I was going to go with the men's team for St. Cloud. And what I mean by this, I think it's a combination of the two. You have to have an identity, like you mentioned. I think the other piece that St. Cloud men's hockey has done for so long, because they obviously were not a powerhouse until recent years, is the Huskies men's team has been really good at finding diamonds in the rough, at finding players that, they see them at 18, 19. They need a little bit of refinement in their game. Then they bring them in at 21, 22, maybe realize they're not going to be a stud, when it comes to the first year or two of their play, but they're going to develop them into that player. They're going to develop them from that B level player into an A minus player. They're going to get a bunch of guys or gals in this instance that are in a similar, kind of skill set and continue to develop them as a group and make them better as a whole and get all those components working together. So I think maybe that's where you look a little bit too, kind of maybe pick the minds a little bit of some of the, the men's hockey coaches and that recruiting piece too, because it is an uphill battle in the WCHA. And it's sad to see, because if you look back historically, some of the best seasons St. Cloud has ever had came in the early years from 2000 to 2010, and it just has not been the same.
And I think, we talk about culture too in that locker room. I know that this group of seniors, we talked about them already, you have really, really tried to cement a winning culture too.
Fantastic people.
Fantastic people, right? The reality says, though, however, Noah, that the lack of success makes that establishing a winning culture a little bit tougher, right? It just simply does. There's nothing that compares to being a player walking on the ice at Ohio State for the first round of the playoffs. You know your record. You're looking ahead at the talent disparity, and the winning culture would say, yeah, maybe we've had a rough stretch, but we can beat this team. We can go in and do it. You kind of wonder where the mentality is with players when you're getting when you're not getting the puck bounces, you're not getting the breaks, you're having stretches of losing streaks. It does wear on you mentally. And I think that's one thing that, it's always the last and the hardest thing to develop is that mental strength. Right. And so this program definitely still has work to do. And you kind of hope that, is this a turning point? I'm not sure. But I do feel like it is on, time for a review per se. And you kind of wonder what Heather Williams is thinking. And I would assume here in the next probably few months, if we would probably know where they feel and where the direction might head, or it might be sooner than that. We'll have to see. Either way, this team definitely needs to get better.
Yeah, they definitely do. To kind of recap a little bit, like we had mentioned, if I can pull it up here, I just had it. There it is. Steve Mcdonald, a 3-year contract for him, finishing 3 seasons since Eric Rude left in the spring of 2019. First season, 6-25-4. Last season, 6-12-1 with the shortened season. And then this year, 9-23-3. So finishing 7th, 6th, and 7th in the WCHA, respectively. In conference play, year number 1, 2-21-1. Year number 2, 6-12-1. Actually, a pretty decent little showing during the COVID year last year. And then 4-20-3 to finish out this particular campaign. So kind of to give you some insight into what's been going on. The last season that Eric Rude left, he had 10 wins to his credit. And the second season that Eric Rude coached was the most successful for him in recent memory, with 14 wins on the season for him, the most since Jeff Geisen coached back in 2009-10. Just a pretty impressive run, Nick. I mean, if you go from 2005-06 to about 2009-10, when some of the big name scorers that still dot the record sheets were, how about this, Nick? For the win column, 18-12, 18-15, and 15. So some pretty impressive numbers, including 3 straight seasons with 11 wins in the WCHA as well, too. So we'll keep an eye on that one. We'll keep you posted for the women's hockey piece, as always, as their season, unfortunately, has come to a close. We are turning over to men's hockey and paying attention to a riveting finish that is brewing in the NCHC. We're going to head on to our extra ice session. Men's hockey is going to be tied in. We're going to take a look at NCHC implications and overall our way too early NCAA tournament prediction. And welcome in episode number 101, the healthy. Whoa, that is not the healthy scratch interview segment. That is the extra ice session.
That was a healthy scratch introduction, though.
Yeah, So excited. Speaking of healthy scratches, if you haven't gotten a chance, besides Nick and I, NCHC officiating supervisor Mike Schmidt joined us for episode 100 last week.
That was fantastic.
Very insightful conversation, about 45 minutes or so. So if you have a chance on a Sunday or Monday drive to get a chance to go back and listen to that one, I think it's well worth your time. I also had a hand, technically, some implications related to the St. Cloud games this weekend, which the Huskies thankfully did not need much help, and we're pretty good on the power play. Shocker. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about some men's hockey and then some NCAA hockey, starting with men's hockey. St. Cloud jumping to number 9 in the pairwise, Duluth trickling backwards, essentially a flip-flop.
They switched,
yeah, to 11. Nick, the only crazy thing, and this maybe alludes a little bit to strength of schedule, these two teams have the worst winning percentage in the pairwise by a mile for people in the top 16. St. Cloud is 20th in the country in win percentage, and Duluth is 26th, yet they sit 9 and 11 in the pairwise. So you talk about implications for playing some good hockey teams. But Nick, what was your assessment of the weekend against Colorado College, and how does it really affect the Huskies moving forward here?
Well, there was a couple of things that they didn't control that actually really affected them beyond just Minnesota Duluth and St. Cloud State. I'm going to get to that in a second, but they did what they had to do. Early Friday, you could certainly tell the first 5 minutes that this team was still playing nervous. They knew what was on the line. It was definitely more of a chess match. Once they got out to a 2-0 lead, you could see it relax. You could see it was a much like, okay, we're doing all right here. And then they added to the lead, ended up being a 4-1 win on Friday. You could see that there was a sigh of relief. There was an exhale. So that was good. Also seeing Hensch's and Brodzinski score for St. Cloud fans, long overdue. And usually with scores like these, you hope that they're streaky, right? And you kind of hope that trend continues. Saturday, much better start. You could see that they were like, okay, we got some confidence now. We got a win under our belt. From start to finish, much better game too. Again, it ended up being a 6-2. A little bit of scary moment there in the third with 2 goals in 26 seconds by CC.
Yeah.
Just some crazy puck luck. I don't know if I'd fault, especially Rennick on the second one, that shot from the point. He never saw. He never moved.
Hey, beats the center ice line.
Yeah, exactly. So at the end of it, they did what they had to do. But how about this? I want to dive into Minnesota Duluth's loss just for the playoff implications, because we talked about it on Fox 9 Plus yesterday in terms of how the Huskies are chasing Minnesota Duluth for that 4th spot. How about this? And this is something some people missed. Had Duluth won, they would have been tied with Western Michigan at 37 points.
Yep.
North Dakota swept Western Michigan this past weekend. Now, the saving grace is Western Michigan technically would have gotten the tiebreaker. The season would have ended today because they had more regulation wins.
Yeah.
And so a little bit scary, right? Because let's just say even St. Cloud was unable to take care of business Friday. There was a chance that Duluth could have passed Western Michigan, and now you're traveling to Lawson for that. Here's some good news, though.
Yeah.
The schedule next weekend, guess what? Western hosts Miami.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we saw some crazier stuff. I mean, Omaha beat Denver on Friday.
And they almost beat them on Saturday until Denver figured it out.
Denver had to crawl back on that one. Holy buckets. So you can definitely see around the league that playoff hockey. I mean, Omaha's playing with a little bit of confidence right now. Holy cow.
I don't know what happened to them, but if anything is a marker, it seems like teams who end up playing Miami and especially start losing to Miami suddenly start playing better hockey. Watch out, St. Cloud fans. Duluth might be, in this particular moment too. But like you mentioned, the Huskies sitting 2 points behind. So Nick, we talked about it. Huskies, in theory, can afford one more loss in the final 2 games, but it can't be Friday. Can't be in regulation. It doesn't matter Friday or Saturday. It just can't be in regulation. Doesn't matter. It's you have to get one regulation win, and if you're going to lose the other game, it can't be in regulation. You have to push it to a shootout. You have to. But hey, why think like that? As Nick Maxim would so eloquently say, go out and get both of them. Get 2 wins.
And these are two teams that played tight. And historically, and it's not even just the season, but historically, the last couple of years, these are tight matchups. Now, with that being said, you brought up the pairwise, Noah. You talked about St. Cloud and UMD essentially flipping UMD down to 11th. That puts them in bubble territory. effectively, right?
Does it though? You know, and
It does and it doesn't. And here's
the reason being is the pairwise is based on common opponents, and the Huskies will have Duluth. We talked about this. It was actually Aaron Anderson who kind of brought this up, I believe, on Twitter. And he was kind of talking about that similar instance. And I said the only way that these two teams, or one of them, is on bubble territory is if one team takes all four from the other. You know, I think if they go back and forth the way that they have, or if that NCHC playoff at least goes to 3 games, I think they're both going to be fine. We'll talk about some pairwise implications in a second, but I mean,
what I meant by that though is, you know, if you're a player, it's not necessarily the direct effect of the pairwise in terms of their ability or their chances to make the tournament. I think both teams are still going to be okay.
Yeah.
But going into what this weekend means for both squads, and especially for St. Cloud State, if you're a player in UMD, you see your pairwise drop to 11, you see yourself lose 4-0 to Miami, a team that you should not have lost to on paper on Saturday.
Yeah.
There's that extra motivation there. And then you're going back to home ice. You're going back against a team that these 2 games that we've had have been contested. There's been some questionable calls / non-calls between these 2 teams. We won't mention somebody specific on this show, but at the end of it, though, they've been good hockey games. They have been, you know, take away those things. They've been very close. They've been both overtime / shootout type matchups. So, I mean, we're setting the stage for some very emotional, essentially playoff hockey. Now, you could argue that St. Cloud had to start playoff hockey this past weekend, and they darn near probably should have. And so, you know, again, we talked about before, they did what they had to do this weekend. Now, can they take care of business this weekend? You hope that St. Cloud isn't flying too high. You know, you hope that they look at the challenge that is coming up again on away ice up there at Amsoy. Beautiful rink, by the way. It's a great venue to watch and even call a hockey game. But this is going to be quite the contest. And as we talked about before, Noah, I'm not sure in the history I've covered this team the last 3, 4, or 5 years that their season-ending series, which has been pretty much a staple in their schedule, just flipping home ice between the 2 squads. I don't think it's had this much implications on the playoffs as they had this year. So it's going to be quite the battle between these 2 squads. And at the end of it, oh boy, how important. I still think, despite the math, I still think Friday's game is still huge for St. Cloud.
Yeah. Well, I think it alleviates some pressure if you're able to get a regulation win, right? I think for a couple of instances, even if you don't get home ice in the NCAA, I think it makes you feel a little bit better about the tournament, right? Just feeling a little bit safer with that too. Obviously, staying pat. If you can stay 500 or so with an opponent, that's an important piece as well too. And obviously regulation versus overtime wins versus ties. You know what I mean? If the Huskies, let's say one game goes to a shootout and the Huskies win the other one in regulation, they actually have the tiebreaker for the pairwise because of the way that works. So, you know, another thing to kind of pay attention to as well. But Nick, I posit this too, and obviously, you know, how big is the Omaha series now for the Huskies? You know,
boy.
But I go back to this, and I know it's been kind of frustrating for Huskies fans. Like I mentioned, though, 5 of the last 8, the Huskies have either won or tied. You know, it's not pretty, but
no.
How fun is it? You know, to kind of be a part of this, to kind of be the middle of the pack team in terms of, you know, having this series kind of come down to the wire, knowing that you have to play your best hockey to kind of make sure you're making your staple as you head into tournament time. I know Huskies fans expected more. I know they expected this team to be doing better. I know the expectation was high, especially after last season, but still, it's going to be a fun ride. It's exciting hockey. And in some senses, yes, it's nice to have the security of your North Dakotas, your Denvers, if you're in that situation. But at the same time, I mean, North Dakota and Denver's weekends, I mean, they don't mean a whole lot, which is a good thing. But at the same time, I try to look at the positive and say, we get some more exciting hockey that has implications and a little bit of emotion. Now, can Huskies fans handle that emotion? That's a question mark and a half, to say the least. But, you know, I mean, really, yes, the Huskies had a really poor month of January, tough-ish start to February. Hopefully they're trending in the right direction now. I thought they had a good week series against Western Michigan. Omaha was a dud. They regrouped the ship against Duluth. They played well against CC. You know, if they carry a good weekend into Duluth, look okay in the NCAA playoffs, I think everything's all right. I think this team was simmering a little bit and has taken a little bit to boil here in the second half in terms of their play. We'll have to see if they can continue to keep that trend rolling. But I mean, all in all, I mean, 5 power play goals in the weekend. Can't complain with that. Much
yeah,
more.
but one of the league's worst penalty kills, though. Let's put that asterisk out there too. Only 71% of the PK was CC, so not great.
Well, you know what would be the scary alternative if the Huskies didn't score 5 power play goals? Then you know what I mean. And but going back to this, St. Cloud threatened the crease. They were threatening the middle areas of the ice. There were a lot of good signs here. I mean, Nick, before we get to some NCAA stuff, I mean, parting thoughts. How did the Huskies play this weekend? And next weekend, why don't we do this? What are your predictions? What is the final outcome up there at Umass Arena?
Well, first of all, I want to make a comment on your security thing, right? There's no such thing as security in college hockey. And what I mean by that is your number ones, your number threes. St. Cloud was number one a couple of times, and what happened? We got one game in, and then we
there's security for Denver, knowing that they're not going to get bounced from a top spot in the NCHC like playoff entry, so to speak. And
you never know, though. I mean, look what Colorado College did just a couple of years ago.
No, I mean at the end of the regular season. I'm saying next weekend has no bearing for them. It doesn't mean anything to them per se. You know what I mean? Denver a little bit, but I mean,
I would disagree.
My point is they're going to be on home ice. Whoever they play, they're going to be on home ice. They know they're in a good spot.
But
you know what I'm saying?
No, I get that, but still, it's like, the mentality is, and this is where I would make the argument that St. Cloud's in a better spot right now. And here's why I say that. For those who want home ice, I want home ice too. Here's the thing. When you're a top spot, like your North Dakota, your Denver's, I don't want to say you get lackadaisical. I don't think you get a little comfortable, maybe is the better word, but I almost saying. But when you're in the situation St. Cloud is, you're fighting, right? And at the end of the day, you are going to circle Omaha on your results calendar, and whether the season goes one way or another, that right now is the pivotal moment of this season. If it goes down, you're still going to look at that and go, this is where we missed an opportunity, right? Now, if you use that as a chance to do a self-reflection in the mirror, and we had this against Duluth last year. They got shellacked, was it 5-1 up at Amsoil just before the end of the season? And we were having the same conversation. Was this team really going to be somewhat of a deep competitive team in the NCAA playoffs, and then they make it to the championship game? So you can look at it two ways. It seems like right now, early after that, they, against CC looked much better. But let's put the reality on the board. CC is not a great opponent, and this is with all due respect. They've got great players.
Neither was Miami, Nick.
Right. But at the end of the day, every opponent's different, and you have to take care of your own game and not worry about anybody else.
I guess my ultimate point was, as we look ahead to this upcoming weekend, what game are you flipping on the TV? Are you watching Denver, Colorado College, or are you watching St. Cloud, Duluth? You know what I mean? I get that. It's exciting. I think it wasn't meant to be any deeper than that. I mean, it was just like, guys, we get excited.
That's why I'm here.
We get excited.
That's why I'm here. I'm here to provide perspective there, Mr. Noah Grant.
Yeah, but we get exciting, meaningful hockey, which is more than North Dakota can say. North Dakota is playing Omaha, which is meaningful hockey for the Huskies, but it's not meaningful hockey for North Dakota fans. I mean,
what is meaningful hockey for North Dakota fans, unless they're trying to hang a championship banner? Let's be real.
Or a banner for the end of the regular season.
Yeah, exactly. So, because
speaking of regular seasons, though, Nick, why don't we talk a little bit NCAA hockey here, because we are a little bit pressed for time per se, related to our own personal schedules. We're taking a look now at the top 16. I have the pairwise pulled up here in my notes, like we mentioned.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, how cute is that?
How cute.
I'll try to go slow for people, because that's what I'll do. I'll go from the back end up, shall we? Umass Lowell is what? You don't like going from the back end up?
I will reserve comment.
Anyway, wow. All right. Umass Lowell is pulling up.
What's in your coffee this morning? My goodness.
Pulling up the rear. I don't need coffee. I'm straight on the stuff here. Umass Lowell in 16, followed by Northeastern and Boston University, both at 14 apiece. BU's
been on a streak. Holy buckets.
Their non-conference schedule has really helped them, because their actual standing in Hockey East is abhorrent. They're it's
abhorrent. Yeah,
they're awful. Ohio State coming in at 13, Michigan Tech at 12, having a sneaky good little season for them. Duluth, Massachusetts, St. Cloud round out 11, 10, and 9, followed by Quinnipiac. Notre Dame sneakily up in that 7th
beat
spot.
Michigan. Hoo-hoo.
Yeah. Western Michigan, followed by North Dakota, sitting in that 5 spot. The Golden Gophers in 4, Denver in 3. The Wolverines dropping to 2, or not dropping, really just chilling at 2, and
Pretty
Mankato
much,
in that top spot here. So, Nick, I did some math.
Oh, I didn't know you were good at that.
Not really. I didn't do actually any math, but my assumption, based on looking at where teams are in the standings related to the respective conferences, related to their non-conference schedule, we always have the discussion how many places are safe, right? When it comes to the NCAA tournament, I believe that if you're in the top 13, you're safe this season. Some seasons is 12. Some seasons, I guess, is probably 14. The kicker, the league that's actually going to make a difference. Obviously, there's an auto bid from Atlantic Hockey, which is the tournament conference champion. It's right now looking like it could be AIC, which they've had some okay tournament success. But the league that's going to make a huge difference, I believe, is going to be Hockey East. Hockey East has a lot of question marks up in the air. I think the teams that are on the bubble, and this is going from 12 onward, Michigan Tech is probably the safest bubble team, so to speak, followed by Ohio State. Those 2 teams probably have a really good chance, provided they have a good showing. Some other ones that are a little bit kind of outside the realm, I think Northeastern, BU, Clarkson, those are 3 teams that, are kind of on the outside looking in. Now, you look at BU's, how much is their non-conference schedule going to help them? How much is their last weekend going to help them? Ohio State's a fringe team, so really their weekend's going to be imperative. They play Penn State, who they've swept both games earlier this season, so they need at least a point against them, I would say. Michigan Tech's at 12. They've got Ferris State this weekend, so they've got to close out that series. And I would say maybe get out of the first round of the CCHA tournament to really kind of feel comfortable where they're at. Dark horse teams, Providence, Connecticut, Cornell, and maybe Omaha. Omaha, if they could sweep UND and have a good showing in the NCHC playoffs, they could make the case for 6 NCHC teams making the tournament. I mean,
that's going to be a stretch.
But I've got 3 locks from the Big Ten, 5 from the NCHC, 2 from the CCHA, 1 from Hockey East, 1 from the ECAC, and the auto bid from Atlantic Hockey. Everything else I think is up for grabs.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird how weak East Coast hockey is this year, really, in terms of a whole, right? It's going to be interesting because we talk about snubs every single year. You wonder what the selection committee will do when they look at that. Especially those bubble teams. As much as you want to say Michigan Tech is safe, I'm not so sure. And the reason why I say that is not because they don't deserve it, but because we end up getting into political conversations of, oh my gosh, there's how many teams in the West? No, let's throw this East Coast team in there. Why the hell not?
I would say Michigan Tech safe because of their schedule. Obviously, they've had Mankato because they're in their conference, but they've had a couple of games against Big Ten opponents. And I think that that's important. And my question is, if you're a team out east, if you're a Northeastern, similar to when they played the Huskies a couple of years ago, do you schedule games like that? Do you schedule your holiday tournaments and try to schedule games around teams that are in the NCHC or the Big Ten to see if you can? And
this is part of the COVID stuff, right? A lot of these teams, just because of multiple factors, whether it's financial and obviously the safety. Again, St. Cloud went out east and had East Coast teams in their buildings a couple of years ago. This was a normal part of their schedule. COVID changed that, and so this is why I say Michigan Tech isn't, to me, 100% safe. Is you're now leaving really a up in the air opinionated discussion on where these teams sit. You don't really have these teams going to either coast and playing each other to really get a good idea of how good these teams are. So again, I think it's going to come down to I hate to use the phrase, I think it's coming down to a favoritism contest. Does the resume on paper for Michigan Tech say they deserve to be there? Absolutely. I am not at all arguing that point. My question is, when the selection committee comes up, how are they going to decide? It's more than just the paper, because you're going to have other teams in that bubble discussion of who is better than who and who deserves to be there. I have a feeling this year more than else, there's going to be teams out there that are on the outside that should be on the inside and vice versa. And we're going to have a ton of discussion on some of those bottom 6 teams and who actually got selected versus who didn't.
Like you mentioned, Clarkson, Northeastern, Merrimack is even in that conversation, depending on what you believe.
Right.
So let's talk about the locks, shall we? One auto bid from Atlantic Hockey. Like I said, it's the winner of the conference tournament, likely AIC. AIC has been the stronger team in that conference. Okay.
Yep.
ECAC, the only lock that I have right now is Quinnipiac. The next closest team is Clarkson, and they're sitting at 17. So they would probably have to win their tournament to get a shot, honestly. I would say Quinnipiac is in. Hockey East, everyone's favorite from the state of hockey, UMass. They are a lock to make this tournament. Northeastern and BU are really on the bubble. I really question.
I would take BU over Northeastern at this point.
Northeastern has the better record and the better win percentage, though. The only thing
BU is the hotter team, though, also right now, too.
Yeah, well, they got a bunch of good-looking guys. I'll agree with that. Oh, you mean hockey-wise? What is it? What is it? They're non-conference. Their strength of schedule really helps them. They have not been that great of a team until as of late. That's my only thing. But we're talking about locks first, so let's start here. Michigan Tech is a bubble team in the CCHA, so the only team as a lock. Shocker, Mankato. The NCHC, I believe, is going to take 5. They're going to have the most entries out of anybody. North Dakota, Denver, Western Michigan, Duluth, St. Cloud. Yep, I agree. Minnesota, Michigan, Notre Dame are the 3 teams from the Big Ten. So let's
go ahead.
Yeah. So let's talk about some bubble teams here. What were we going to say about Notre Dame? I'm actually kind of curious.
They're a lock.
Yeah, they're in. I definitely agree.
That they swept Michigan this weekend, right? So they're in.
In fact, I wonder who they actually have this weekend. Let's take a look here with our handy dandy calculator. They got Wisconsin this weekend, so
they'll be fine.
Well, provided they take care of business.
Wisconsin's bad. They'll be fine.
We said that about Miami once. Anyway, so so some bubble teams here: Ohio State, Michigan Tech, Northeastern, BU, Clarkson, and maybe Merrimack in there. Omaha, if they have a really good showing this weekend, they can have a good showing in the NCHC tournament. But they have to really string some games together.
I think, honestly, in my opinion, Omaha is going to have to win the NCHC tournament to get in.
I agree, or at least make the championship game. At worst the second round, and they have to at least split this weekend at least to even. Have
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so. I think they have to win these last 2 in North Dakota. I think they would have to make it to a championship game. Yeah. If you don't get the auto bid, that might put you in the conversation, but it might be a conversation with Omaha too little too late. I think there's a case for Omaha, but again, with how stacked the NCHC teams are, you can't put them above anybody else in there. They're in a tough position. They're in a really tough spot.
It's just weird the way that it kind of works. Like Providence has 21 wins on the season, right? They're 21-13-2. They're sitting at 18th in the pairwise. I'm assuming you probably have it up in front of you, but
yeah, I do.
But like I said, really through the top 11, really kind of Duluth is kind of the last maybe safe entry so far at the number 11 spot here, and everybody else is up for grabs. So you've got all these teams. We'll run through it one more time just so you understand where we're at here. 1 down to 11 now. Mankato, Michigan, Denver, Minnesota, North Dakota, Western, Notre Dame, who's sitting at 7th right now, Quinnipiac, St. Cloud at 9, UMass at 10, Duluth at 11.
And that's all safe.
All safe. I agree. So, Nick, number 16 is going to be the auto bid from Atlantic Hockey. Fair to say.
Let's just throw AAC in there just for argument's sake. So now we've got 4 spots to play with.
So 12 through 15, who makes the tournament? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go BU, Ohio State, Michigan Tech, and oh boy.
Yeah, the last one's tough.
It's tough. I'm going to throw a wild card. I'm going to say Clarkson. Honestly, I think Clarkson has made a little bit of a case. Yeah. But there's really, Ohio State to me should be, at least math wise better, percentage wise, right? Again, on paper, Michigan Tech should be, higher percentage. But BU, Northeastern, UMass Lowell, Clarkson, Providence, there's really not anybody here that sticks out to me. At least as far as being above. Again, Boston's had a recent winning streak. Northeastern, they don't really impress me. Clarkson's had a good couple of wins here recently. So, and again, that's the other thing too. There's human beings making these decisions. Do they base on a recent memory? Do they take the whole picture? I don't know. Yeah. It's tough. And again, and that's why to me, Omaha, I think has to win the conference tournament to get in, to get the auto bid and here's the unfortunate part about that. If you're St. Cloud, and let's just say you had a catastrophic weekend against Duluth this next weekend and you lose 2, and you also then have a really tough showing in the NCAA first round, if Omaha goes all the way and wins, that might put St. Cloud in that same territory too.
And that's always the risk. But as I was looking through the conferences, like I said, I think besides Hockey East, I think everything, unless there's a crazy St. Lawrence type piece, similar to what we saw last year, which just sucks they really didn't get a chance to play. But unless you have something crazy like that, I don't see a whole lot of change. In Hockey East is the only one where I see a potential upset brewing. I mean, let's be fair, Nick, and crazier things have happened. We know.
Oh, yes.
But do we really believe that Omaha can win the NCHC Frozen Faceoff? I don't think so. I just don't see their path being that readily available. And even if they do, I mean, are they going to be that great in the tournament too? I have no idea.
Well, they certainly showed the hockey world this last weekend by giving Denver fits. That maybe they're sort of that pseudo dark horse, because we can't call Western Michigan a dark horse anymore. They're a good team, right?
They are.
I think right now they are kind of that dark horse. I think Omaha does have that potential. You talk about team trending up at the right time. I think they are. So is the probability there in their favor? No, but you don't need math. Math doesn't work that way. They just need to win hockey games. And, when you come away with a split against Denver and, you easily could have had both. Honestly, it was a late rally by Denver on Saturday to pick up that split. Yeah. I think Omaha's feeling pretty good. Again, you swept St. Cloud at home. I don't think anybody expected a sweep, and in the fashion, it was pretty convincing fashion in that series. You give Denver a rough ride. Now, the one thing that sucks is in between that, you somehow got swept by Miami. I'm not sure how that happened.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's kind of the curious state of Omaha, is that you have good showings against good teams. Somehow you lay down flat against an inferior opponent, for all due respect to Miami. So that makes them that true dark horse. The probability is low, but can they do it? Again, look at CC. They made it to the Frozen Faceoff in 19. Did they make noise? No, because again, that the top 3 teams in the NCHC, North Dakota, Western, and Denver, all very, very deep teams. But in a one-off game, right, anything can happen. That's what makes college hockey so fun, is that you never have you really have a safe feeling in your stomach, and that's what makes it great.
Yeah, Hockey East is just going to be interesting. I definitely think Ohio State makes the tournament. I think that they're going to have a good showing this weekend. I think they're going to be okay. I still think Michigan Tech's going to be all right. I think the 2 teams flip-flop. I think Ohio State jumps to 12. I think Michigan Tech sits at 13. That's kind of my assessment. Boston University, they've got Maine as well as a single game against BC today to kind of close out their regular season. So potential for sliding rather than improving per se.
Yeah.
I'm still not sold on them, Nick. I don't really know. Northeastern's got Merrimack. So I think that a good showing against Merrimack could really help Northeastern in that respect. I think Northeastern makes it to the big dance. I really do. I got to be honest.
They got a chance.
Yeah. So that leaves one spot left. Comes down to BU, Clarkson, or Providence, really, unless there's an upset in one of these tournaments here. And gosh, I have no idea, to be honest with you. I like Clarkson and I like Providence. I just don't know that both of those 2 teams have the better argument, just because BU has played so well. Now, if BU drops 2 of their last 3, I think there's a very, very different conversation going on there.
100%. Especially against the opponents that they would drop to as well.
Yeah. I know that BU, I think, has beaten Providence in the single game that they have played this season. I have not looked at Clarkson, so I'm trying to buy myself some time here. Clarkson finishes the season. Their season's actually done, so Clarkson's actually done. So Clarkson's done, so they would have to win out in the tournament. So scratch that idea.
Yeah.
So Providence is the only one that we're looking at here.
And it's interesting too. While you look,
and they're done too. Actually, they just have the U.S. under-18 team. So I would say probably. Well, I guess the other team is Umass Lowell. I don't know how we keep missing them. I
don't know, because they were up around 10 at one point this season.
They've got UNH or New Hampshire, who is 30th in the country. So I would say really whoever has a better showing between
It's going to
UMass
become the
Lowell
conference.
and BU, unless somebody surprises, if there's somebody that comes out of note, like if Omaha comes out of left field and wins the NCHC tournament, like.
And you talk about how, and this is why I make the favoritism argument, right? The math here is done between these squads. So and it's one spot potentially, and I'm almost glad that I'm not part of this committee, right? Because it's like, how do you pick that last slot? Let's say everything else falls. How do you do it?
It's always been name brands, hasn't it? And if you're looking between BU, UMass Lowell, and Northeastern, who are you taking? You're taking BU because BU is the name,
And that's why Michigan Tech scares me, is that they're not a household name.
I think they're safe because I think they've had a much better season than BU in terms of strength of schedule and just the way that they played. But that's just me. Now, if they crap the bed against Ferris State, we've got alarm bells going off quickly because they could drop to 15. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. It's there. This weekend is really important for Michigan Tech even if they split.
I think if they get out of the first round of the CCHA playoffs, I think they're going to be okay. But mostly because the teams behind them, I don't see anybody that really strikes me as like, oh my gosh, they're gonna maybe BU, just because BU is like a true and honest wild card depending on how you view them.
They are. I mean? No, they are.
But do you take the argument and say that BU is in and Michigan Tech is out just based on the way that the two teams have played? Like that's, provided Michigan Tech wins their last two games, they're going to be at 21 wins, and
they'll be fine.
If BU wins, they're going to be at what, like 23, maybe 24. It's like,
oh boy, and I want to make sure I rephrase this too. I want Michigan Tech in there.
Same.
I think they deserve to be in there, But again, when you get to that essentially 11 on down, right? The decisions that we've seen from this committee make have sometimes been mind-boggling. And so that's why, like, I'm nervous for them, because you don't want it to come to that position, right?
They've had some like heartbreak in recent memory, though. Speaking of Fargo, I mean, they were a team that really felt like they were in control. You have a defenseman who falls, in his senior game too. I also want to try to find this too, Nick. Sorry to cut you off. College Hockey News did come out with their pairwise predictor too, so I want to pull that up and touch on it very quickly.
Yeah, I know. I've seen that.
Before, but I mean, Nick, when it comes to the Huskies. Again, going back to the argument, I do want to pause at this one. We almost forgot this. So Go Huskies Woo came at us with this one, talking about how Michigan just narrowly missed winning the Big Ten. It was Minnesota who's going to take the cake on that one. And his prediction was that Michigan would not win the Big Ten. I'm sorry to say, you had a 6 out of 7 chance, of getting that correct versus us saying that Michigan was going to be the team to beat in the Big Ten, and it took until the last week of the regular season for that to happen. Exactly. So, so to think that you were an elite hockey mind on that one, Go Huskies. Well, I'm sorry. They still have a very good chance of winning the Big Ten tournament. So don't rest on your laurels quite yet.
I will give Go Huskies one thing. And I think I know I made this argument too, early when they were ranked number 1 in the preseason poll. I said that they were ranked on their talent, not on their play. Notre Dame kind of proved me right also this weekend, that their young and inexperience is going to be sort of their Achilles heel as they move forward into playoff time, whether it's Big Ten or especially the NCAA tournament. There's no question that this team has a ton of great high-end talent. Yes. There's no denying that.
And that was where our point stemmed from, is this team's going to be a lot deadlier than people were giving them credit for. They're number 2 in the pairwise.
Right. Now, can some say that's propped a little bit? No. I mean,
hey, they had a great showing in their second game of the holiday tournament.
I know, right? So I can't believe that still, honestly.
You know what I can't believe?
What's that?
I was just looking at this because the pairwise probability matrix is what it's called from College Hockey News updated itself last night. Duluth has dropped from 98% to 92% after last night's action. Yeah, so kind of interesting. Your Michigan Tech favorites, they're at 88%. Ohio State's at 80%. And like I said, that's about as far as we'll go with the potential safe of the safe here. BU's at 59%, Northeastern at 49%, and then Umass Lowell on down is 30% or below. So, I mean,
again, these people aren't using analytics to make these calls. That's what's funny to me, is that you can have these predictors all the hell you want, but I don't know.
But they're using math. That's
at the end of the day, I still feel like they almost feel like they put
but you can
like names in a hat and draw from them, for the last couple spots.
But
Kind
you
of feels
can
that way sometimes.
But you can do that comparison, right? You know that the Huskies, for example, have Duluth, right? You know what I mean? So I think the 92% comes into, well, if Duluth loses all 4 and then gets bounced in the first round of the NCAA playoffs, okay, maybe they slip to 15 and then they get ousted by a Hockey East team. You know what I mean? Like,
how about this? Let's to end the show. I've got an idea real quick because we could spend hours debating the pairwise rankings. We really could.
Oh, I thought we were going to. I thought this was our 5-hour show.
I know, right? I think. How about this? Because right now the 4 number 1 seeds: Minnesota State, Michigan, Denver, Minnesota. Right? Which one of these teams actually has the bigger chance to be upset?
You mean the top 5 in the.
No. Like the top 4. So they'd be the number 1 seeds in the regionals. Which one of these number 1 seeds would have the greatest possibility of not making it out of the regional and being upset, not making it to the Frozen Four?
Oh, between Mankato, Michigan, Denver, and the Gophers.
Gophers.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm gonna go on a limb. I'm gonna say it's Michigan.
Yeah.
I think it's Michigan.
I actually okay, hot take here. And I don't know if it'll be an upset depending on what the region looks like. I honestly think it's Mankato.
Oh.
I think it's Mankato. And the reason I say Mankato, the one thing that can be a deterrent, and I know their early conference schedule was good, just like the Huskies were. Mm-hmm. Mankato's season finished relatively early. They have not played a lot of hockey. They're number 1 seed, which is like the worst curse in college hockey. And Mankato, as of recent, has not had a very strong strength of schedule. So I believe that all those factors could make that a very interesting hockey game. Now, when I say it depends on what you believe as an upset, do they get through AIC? Probably. But what I say by that is then is the next team that gets them, who usually in that regional potentially might be an 8, 9, 10. Could be the Huskies.
Could be St. Cloud.
Could be St. Cloud. I mean, do you view that as an upset? I think that for where Mankato
wise, yes.
For where Mankato is relative to the position the pairwise, which is 1, I think they have the biggest chance of not making it to the big dance. Out of those 4 teams, I think Denver is probably the safest team out of those 4. I would agree with that. I think they're the most complete team, top to bottom. I really think the Minnesota Golden Gophers, yes,
they're playing really, really well.
You heard it on this podcast. They are trending in the right direction. So in typical Gopher fashion, they'll get bounced in the first round, right? But then
they'll whine about what was it? The rest?
The rest time. The start time for the game. I think the top 2 spots are probably the most question marks. I'll agree with you with Michigan too. I don't know that Michigan is potentially a team. In fact, I have not gotten a chance to look. So why don't we look one more time here? Who Michigan, how they've been doing as of late, besides the sweep against Notre Dame. Narrowly escaping Ohio State. They beat Michigan State, and they've got Michigan State again to close out the regular season. So really kind of depends on what Michigan team shows up. And I don't say that to be obvious. I say that because when it comes to young teams, that's usually the question mark is, can you handle the big time? Can you handle the tournament? And let's remember, a lot of the players who were underclassmen last year did not play in the NCAA tournament.
Correct, because they couldn't. So yeah, and that's the ultimate X factor, right? And this is where the Huskies, they can carry some confidence, is because they were here last year. They know what it takes to get to there. Now, will they be able to to put thought to ice, right? Can they execute? That's the bigger question mark, I think, with this team. So as long as you have a good showing here these next couple weekends and end a regular season and then NCHC playoffs, that should be okay.
I really hope the Wolverines win the Big Ten tourney though. But with that being said, Nick, I would encourage fans and listeners, like they kind of did last year a little bit, definitely tweet us your predictions for who you think maybe those last couple spots in the NCAA are going to be, or who you think maybe the biggest upset is going to be. We always love to hear what you have to say within reason. If you're not being petty about it, you know who you are. But nonetheless,
speaking of petty, let it go, bro. Jeez.
Nonetheless, is there anything else you wanted to add about NCAA hockey, about the St. Cloud State Huskies? I mean, what a privilege it has been for us to be able to cover this team over the past couple of years, coming down to the wire in the last week of the regular season, approaching the NCHC and NCAA playoff time. I mean, it's really been a blast, and we're excited, obviously, to be along for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, let's put it this way, right? You want these ups and downs because you're still in the conversation to have a postseason. You're not having, say, the discussion Omaha's having, where
about tea times,
about tea times, right? Where it's, unless essentially you take care of your own business, but also get lots of help above you. Your season's coming to a draw here in about 2, if not 3 weeks at the most. So. Huskies fans, again, to have the thought of a postseason, to have the opportunity to play, to continue your season, you have that there. Enjoy the ride. Yeah, emotions are there. I mean, I think we would both be lying with us that we weren't emotionally invested in this squad.
Yeah.
But I think again, when you get to the positions that we've been in, you kind of learn to. Just kind of like the players do, right? You kind of let even keel, right?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to the players and the coaching staff. They know what they got to do. Can they go out there and execute? Can they do it?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been fun.
And enjoy the ride, guys. Like, seriously, and here's the thing. If the final game of the season ends 7-1, like, that sucks, so be it. If the final game ends 4-3 and it comes down to a final bounce and a net mouth scramble, like, that's okay too. Like, that's tournament time. It's all right. We want the boys to win. We believe they can. We believe they have the ability to go on a run this season. But just enjoy every minute of hockey and take it for what it is. Because like you mentioned, Nick, having a top 10 team in the country doesn't come around for a lot of programs, didn't come around for St. Cloud for a long time until recent memory. So just enjoy the ride, support the boys, and it's going to be a fun ride to the finish.
That it will. So, and I think with that being said, Noah, buckle up, right? This is going to be some exciting from here on out. I mean, again, a very important series with us, with Duluth in Am soil, coming this weekend to determine playoff seedings. They're on a collision course to play each other 4 games, essentially the next 2 weeks, or possibly 5. And you talk about building a rivalry. This is kind of why this rivalry has exploded. Is regular season matchups have been close. They've had a lot of games playoff wise. I mean, in fact, again, the 2019 NCAA championship game at St. Paul was one of the best hockey games I've ever seen with those 2 squads. So what's
your prediction? Is that the Huskies sweep the Bulldogs, Western Michigan gets swept by Miami, and the Huskies have Omaha in the first round? Okay, got it. Because that's exactly how that would work, right? But like we mentioned, Huskies Friday and Saturday taking on Minnesota Duluth. Following weekend is the best of 3 series in the NCHC opener for the playoffs. Frozen face-off after that, NCAA regionals after that, and then wait 2 weeks for the Frozen Four after that. For Minnesota Wild hockey, they've got 3 games coming up this week, and then a game on Sunday, followed by 3 more games and another game on Sunday that following week. So identical weeks in terms of the scheduling for the Minnesota Wild to kind of pay attention to.
They basically play every other day. They basically,
Yeah, pretty much. It's not until a couple weeks that they have a 2 strings of 2 days off in there. But nonetheless, that will do it. Episode number 101. We appreciate you sticking around for this longer episode, and we will see you soon for episode 102.
One-timer coming, they score! Ripped in! A bomb from Perix!
So Dana Rasmussen fires and she scores! Dana Rasmussen for the Huskies
Dwayne Kaprizov in for a chance to win it. He scores! Kirill the Thrill is for real. Welcome to the NHL. A game winner.
St. Cloud Cathedral is now 42.6 seconds away from wrapping up the school's first ever title.